Hey everyone, welcome to WhyViz podcast, an award-winning podcast that lets information designers share the story behind their projects. My name is Lucy Liu and I'll be your guest host today. I'm currently a student at Mount Royal University studying information design. I had to design a poster with a client this semester for one of my projects, and it was in collaboration with Urban Society for Aboriginal Youth, or USAY, not-for-profit organization centered on leading Indigenous youth. I've come out with a few apps dedicated to changing the narrative surrounding Indigenous issues, one of the apps being IndigiTRAILS, which is the app that I chose to work on. Booklet from International Indigenous Design Charter. They emphasize the importance of design about Indigenous peoples being Indigenous-led to make sure that they oversee the creative development and design process. And throughout the entire process of this project, we had a couple feedback sessions with Leanne to make sure our posters were culturally sensitive, as well as had other guest speakers guide us towards success for designing with Indigenous groups. I made sure to listen and take in all the feedback I got to implement it into my poster. And in this episode, I will be covering three main themes. 1, the reasoning behind why I chose IndigiTRAILS. 2, explaining the main sections of information, especially why I chose my hero. And 3, the color palette, layout, typography, and hierarchy. With Leanne, she gave us 3 choices and briefly explained each one and exactly how she wanted the posters to be presented. This reminded me of a section from the book, Elements of Indigenous Design by Gregory Youngin, and how it is important to consult Indigenous community members like Leanne in order to have their voices heard in the way that they want them to be heard. I personally connected with IndigiTRAILS because of the aspect of nature involved with learning, and I also wanted to go on one of the walks. IndigiTRAILS uses GPS AR, where augmented reality content shows up based on the user's geological location. I feel like if this app got more funding, especially from the government, if they do want to take a step closer to reconciliation, can help transform the app into something really fun and educational for everyone. This brings me into my next theme, explaining the main sections of information and especially why I chose my hero. Before we even got into researching or developing our content for the post, we had to learn the basics on how to respectfully work with Indigenous communities in a culturally sensitive way. In Elements of Indigenous Style, taught us how to write with and about Indigenous peoples. And from the book, I learned that it is better to try and write about Indigenous issues and be wrong than to not try at all. And this project was a bit intimidating to me because I've never delved into a project like this before. I did find some parts of this project harder to write for than others, such as the personal experiences section and how I had to expand on the quotes that I found. Another part of Elements of Indigenous Style taught me that if I'm naming certain groups of Indigenous peoples, I do need to double check that it is not an outdated term. I did so for my Indigital Australia section, and I made sure that the founder was in fact a Carbroga woman. In the book, I also read that there is importance of respecting oral traditions, and the IndigiTRAILS app can do this because it contains voiceovers that guide the user on the trails. This can be a great storytelling tool and benefit the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. My hero of the poster was centered around storytelling and how audio can be very important. I also think that by having audio can get more people involved in the use of the app if they have any disabilities that would otherwise discourage them from this. And according to the International Indigenous Design Charter, designers should listen respectfully, be inclusive, and make sure that collaborators get the credit that they deserve, as well as obtain appropriate permissions where required. They made sure to give all the artists who created art for the Fort Calgary Loop credit, and they put their names right below the map that I used. And when I was researching for my data, especially my hero data, to keep in mind that all data is biased and nothing is going to be perfectly objective, and it did make me look towards more credible sources such as Statistics Canada for my hero. And I found that 48% of Canadians from the ages of 16 to 65 are considered to have inadequate literacy skills, which both Kelsey and I thought was a surprising amount of the population. And we also thought that it would be really eye-catching. Data feminism, a term popularized by Catherine and Lauren, is where people choose to look at data in a way that challenges oppressive systems, not just gender, to help minimize bias. On to our next theme: color palette, layout, typography, and hierarchy choices. I didn't want to contribute to any stereotypes already surrounding the Indigenous communities, so I chose not to use orange or any graphics like a dream catcher or headdress. In the International Indigenous Design Charter, it says that designers should consider the reception and implication of all designs in the past and present so that they remain culturally appropriate, which is why feeding into stereotypes is not recommended. How I chose my color palette was I took the colors already in the IndigiTRAILS app, and I picked all the colors from there. Use these colors in a hierarchical way, with the darker colors being more of a background color and the brighter ones, like the bright green, as the highlighting ones, just to highlight certain sections like this. And the layout of the poster was structured so people would look at either the introduction or the hero first, depending on whether or not they even need the introduction. And everything was placed into groups. I have 5 on my poster. Chose Helvetica Nu for my larger text, and Tamil Sagnam for my body text. I chose these fonts because they were very minimal, and I also wanted to keep the entire poster minimal and modern so that people can focus on the information given to them and not on the specific graphics. According to the calls to action from CARFAC, governments should adequately fund Indigenous-run organizations that support Indigenous artists and work together to reach similar goals. I agree with the statement, and part of the reason why I chose to target the government was that I believe they should take more responsibility and try to educate as many people as possible on this topic. Overall, I really enjoyed working with this client since it taught me how to be more culturally aware and sensitive, and it also taught me how to design on a bigger page and landscape as well. Thanks for listening to the end of this episode. Thanks to WhyViz for letting me speak today. And tune in again next week for a new episode.